Welcome back, everybody. It's time we have a look at another old magazine. This one is the May 1963 issue of Model Railroader. Now, I only collect magazines from pre 1980, whether they're British magazines, European magazines, or American magazines, because that was the golden age of model train publishing. You were shown projects, you were filled with inspiration. In recent decades, model train magazines, particularly since the 2000s, have been just nothing but sales catalogs. They don't inspire in any way, really, I don't think. And they're just really quite vacuous and empty, and they're pretty much pointless at this point in the game. They probably wouldn't be pointless if they went back to this. And you'll see a lot of the wargaming magazines, like the fantasy wargaming magazines and other wargaming magazines, they have a lot of the same spirit that you found in these old train magazines. Projects you can build, ways you can save money, this kind of thing, and very hands on. And that's why I love train magazines from before 1980. So this looks very, very different than how Model Railroad looks today. Okay, it doesn't have many any color pictures inside, and most of them didn't. But what it has is tons of inspiration. So on the cover, you're kind of given an insight of what this magazine is about. Well, this particular issue is it has a drawing of a steel hopper, and also a photograph of the finished model. So instantaneously you've been told, here's the drawing, and here's something we're going to show you inside you can build. Quite different than saying, here's something that costs like $100, and here's where you buy it, which is what the magazines are like today. This also tells you there's something about a gantry crane and a Canadian Pacific 10-wheeler plans. Saying you want to, back then people had complex workshops and could build steam locomotives from scratch using, they had, like, lathes and casting materials and everything, and they could do it. This is before the age of 3D printing. And it was remarkable the skills that people had, because you had tech colleges and things like that then teaching people how to do things like this. So it says for over a quarter of a century of service. Of course, it's much older than that now, and this is a classic blueprint. So we turn it over in the first page, and you get an ad for Tyco. Tyco Precision Engineering Kits, and these were their freight car kits, and they also had local kits where you could screw them together. They were not just something that you popped on, you opened the box and put on the layout. They were made in such a way that you felt like you were building something. So you might have to screw the trucks in, clip it together, and they became in these attractive boxes. And there was cabooses and so on. This was before Tyco became a kind of a gimmick toy company in the 1970s. They actually were in the Mantua days, and before, a relatively serious builder of models, for the time. And they were not, they were aimed at the toy market, but they were much better than the things that came along later, which are kind of, gimmicky kind of train things. So there we go, volume 30, number 5, May 1963, and a list of the contents and what's on the cover, and it tells you about that hopper, and kind of like a flash news of what's coming out. So it's like there's something like a bulletin board on this side. Okay, next page. Well, America's Hobby Center. I actually used to go to America's Hobby Center at 23rd Street in Manhattan. I think it closed in the late 90s, but it was like I used to work on Saturdays in a place in Greenwich Village. It was like a warehouse, and I used to work half day Saturday, and I used to always go on the Saturday to America's Hobby Center in 23rd Street in Manhattan to pick up something. They always had huge bargains. Now, it wasn't a traditional model train shop. You had these catalogs, these circulars, and you either brought in this magazine and you say, I want that, or I want that, kind of like the Argos catalog today. And the guys went into the back of the warehouse, which was on the second floor of like a Manhattan brownstone, and picked up the pieces you wanted. Some of the things here, the Penline GG1 is $14. The Athearn GP9 diesel is $5.95. The inflation really is remarkable, and there's all kinds of so many things are still available today, like a lot of the Atlas track pieces and stuff like that. Hand painted metal HO figures, 29 cents per set. I would have liked to have seen them. I'm not aware of any American metal figures. The Tyco GP20 had only just come out then. Look at that. And 988. That was the original with the Mantua metal drive. Much better than the later drive that came along, which was like a pancake motor. This is more like a motor bogie. The Power Torque motor came along later, and it's not a it's actually a powerful motor bogie, but it was not as reliable as the Lima or the Hornby pancake motors. It's always breaking. But the original one, if you can find any Tycos that have the original Mantua power bogie, they're much better. And here we have, like, there was so many kits available back then, and parts, loads of brass. That's what I noticed about many of these magazines down, that there was a lot more brass available, high-end models, Viking German automobiles that you can use in the US market, trade topics. This would be like the staff would buy and build things. You see the way this place looks here? That's what America's represented to look like. There's a counter, you like looked in a catalogue and someone got it for you. Here we have a creosoting plant. That's something you could actually build quite easily. A freight motor in O and HO gauge of the Lakeshore Electric Railway. Looks like a stamped model of some kind. Definitely a kit. Athearn had just brought out their freight trucks with the RP25 wheels, which was the RP25 wheel is a remarkable machine. You'd think of it, it's like a very narrow profile that would easily just derail, but the RP25 is made in such a way that it almost like rides. It's based according to the width of the rail and the curvature of the flange meeting the rail. It's actually designed so it rides without derailing, and you think you see these first, say that's going to come right off the track, but it doesn't. Well, unless you've got really bad track, it doesn't come off it, because whatever the curvature of the curving line where the flange meets the main wheel, there's something, it creates this kind of almost like a dance where like it moves side to side. So when it hits a defect, rather than it going up, it kind of like rides around it. So the flange is like not as important as it would be, say, on European. Gem models, more Philadelphia, more brass. And this is a big thing to see in all train magazines, all electronic and electrical parts for making your own switches and things like that. There's a review of another brass, beautiful. It's an Erie K5A Pacific, stunning model. Aristocraft, they're still going today, I'm pretty sure. Then you have signals, all kinds of accessories. This is another thing pre-internet. Where did you get your information on where you're building a prototype? You got color slides or printouts. This was a big thing. But even right like in this part of the world until the 90s, that was a big deal. An old ad for Dremel, that's how long they've been around. Valiant models in E9A. Unpainted satin brass 12-wheel drive, 2 motors, $40. Walters coach kits, if you can get them, they're fantastic models. They're scale length, and they're just really beautiful models. They're kits you build yourself. Even if you can buy them secondhand built up, they're so much better than many of the models that came later. Now, Märklin was very common in America in the 1960s, and I think because the 3-rail system, a lot of people were using things like Lionel 3-rail system, and they switched over to a 2-rail HO system, and so you have reversing loops, or it could be done. You had contact tracks to do special effects and stuff like that, and I think that's why in the 60s Märklin was so popular in America. It was also probably better than a lot of the HO stuff available at the time for sheer reliability. You know, it had like the electronic system of American was stunning. Of the old M-Track, where you literally could build a DC train operating computer using just basically a simple wiring mechanism and things like contact switches and tracks and relays that all came standard, and you didn't have to really make anything. Again, more brass, more Mark Theater. Pen line. I have some pen line stuff. A Thern introduces a new line of HO scale railroad kits featuring trucks with RP25. You see, it's a big deal. And here we have the contour. You see, this is what I'm talking about. You see that contour there. A real breakthrough. The National Model Railroad Association engineered this. What keeps it on the track is this curve here. So the flange becomes almost irrelevant. More kits, more kits. Campbell scale. These are letters for the more kind of electronic switches and stuff like that. Beautiful log card there by KD. And KD were making HO then. I know they make N now. I don't think they make HO anymore. I think they stopped that years ago. Code 70 track. A lot of track then was hand laid. Bowser still going. Making steam locomotive kits. I didn't notice until I found this magazine recently that Atlas made a race car kit. So you could have like a roadway. It's kind of like a Scalextric. Not really. It's more like the Matchbox motorway, I should say. But you could also race them as well. Mimic motorways, Triangle, that kind of thing, where you would incorporate trains and a roadway. These are the old Atlas kits. These are excellent kits that have really stood the test of time. I've seen tremendous painting and weathering jobs of their passenger stations and their elevated shanty for the elevated interlocking tower. These are really good kits that have stood the test of time. I have this turntable, as you've seen on the old layout. It's going to be installed into a section I'm going to build into the new layout. And this is it's not a HO, no, I think it's like a 1/2 inch scale. So this is like, just showing what's capable on a larger scale. This is a hand-built model that is stunning, actually. Again, it's not what I do. Track-sized photos. This is a man's. Again, I was talking about some people's ability to be able to build things. Here's a gentleman built all these from scratch. I mean, just look at them. They're incredible. And here's some club. It has like a montage of photos showing the bench work done with the track laid. But this is what people could do back then. Between getting castings and wheels and parts, the actual fabrication they could do the riveting and things like that. And here's some traction stuff. Traction stuff has always been popular in America with this series modelers. Not so much now, but back then. I guess because you could fit like a complex railroad in a smaller space. Building an early steel hopper. This is an early one. This is the one on the cover by the trucks. They're Victorian. They're not like the later Archbar and other kind of trucks that came along. But otherwise, this is very similar to the modern hoppers that came later. Cost of materials, styrene sheets, is very little, and it's heaps of fun. Ahead of you before you finish the gem. I mean, that's the hobby, isn't it? This is what myself and Colin talk about in our videos. That's the hobby. It's tons of fun building things. And if you make a mess of it, you'll get better for the second time you try it. And here we go. Here's how to fabricate the parts and how to fit them. And it doesn't look so complicated when you talk through it. The thing is, the golden rule with this kind of stuff is take your time and have fun. I mean, these are quite complex drawings to really guide you through it. And where you need castings, like for the brake wheel and so on, they'll tell you where to buy them. And the decals and so on. I mean, this is 6-7 pages devoted to how to build this early hopper in different forms. And here's the drawing. Again, those Victorian type solid trucks. I mean, so useful. This is O scale version, so you'd have to reduce that by half. But if you had a capillary, you can do it with mathematics, no problem. Now, another thing, you can also build this if you want. A Canadian Pacific Class D4 G10 wheeler. Almost British looking this is. except for the tender. There was a British vibe to that, being Canadian. Take away the cowcatcher, it's almost like a British engine. Realistic performance. Can we simulate the effect of load and characteristic of steam and diesel engines, the depletion of water and tender, and other factors engines running with a good set of controls? This would be like these active controllers where they apply a resistance and so on. When you're going up and down the hill, it slows it down as it's going down the hill. Again, look at all the reading in this. You notice this magazine would be a week of reading. And I'm still enjoying them now. Better layout lighting, how to light up your layout. This has become more prevalent these days with so many people using YouTube to show their layouts off. I have problems with that. I still have to work out the lighting to get the best views. But you see how to place the lighting here. That's just something that's, today is even more relevant. The idea of the layout being a theater with a stage set. A crane with chain hoist that straddles a track. A very useful model. You see this all over the world. Like a girder with a hoist on it for taking loads like sleepers and things like that off, or long loads like pipes and logs off the back of the flat cars. There we go. Looks like a transformer. Yeah. Now that's a really simple thing to build. Even someone with basic skills, you can buy the styrene or even fabricate it, and you can build that. Or you can go down to the shops and buy a really expensive one. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that too, but to me, that would be much more fun to build that than just buy the box off the shelf or off eBay. And here's the Milwaukee Road version. I love these American water towers. I'm going to build one of these. This is actually a very good project. I'm going to have a go at this myself. And this is an all-passenger station, Port Allen Station. It's located on the Texas and Pacific, down in Texas, I guess. And even if you don't build this station, you've got very useful measurements. You've got the door height, window heights, this kind of thing. You've got something that's very useful for other projects, or you could build this as it is. I love the freight section here at the back, above the ground, so a truck can load directly into it. Loading dock. And this is a Connecticut open trolley car. Again, that's very similar to the Isle of Man ones. There, something you can build yourself. Now look how many pages we've gone through in this magazine, and it's literally been so far. Here's what you can build if you want to build it. Here's the plans. We can help you. Transistors for model circuitry. When transistors were a big deal, I guess. They weren't around that long in the early 60s. They only come out in the 50s, I think. Before that, they were using valves and how to use them. How to set the bias. That's funny. Dual transistor switch. Negative contact signal. There's the load. Positive output. Again, people would have studied electronics and stuff like that in trade school. Someone would have known how to make these things. More of that, and that for trains, magazines, great books. I've looked at the books in here. A shunting puzzle. Great Switchman's Headache, a shunting puzzle. And this is AHM, there's been a lot of Rivarossi and Mahano stuff from the old Yugoslavia. The Fairbanks Morgs New Haven Sea Liner. But that's I have that model, but it's not correct because the New Haven version, the back had 6-wheel trucks. It was Boco. That was to balance the water heater at the back. Otherwise, but I mean that's something I want to try and kit bash, is to try and make a Cobra. The Long Island Railroad has some of these as well, and I've often thought that would be like a model I'd like to build. And then just people talking about club sessions and stuff like that. All the little details you can buy, the brass castings and so on. I mean, just look at the reading in it. The Pacific Fast Mail model. This would be stuff from the Far East. Brass. It's just stunning. That you could get these models down, but that kind of says it all, doesn't it? They're not cheap even then. True scale track. This was the first kind of, in America anyway, I think the roadbed ready track, which I'm a big fan of and used on my layout. Not the true scale. I used the Pico A track and a few other kinds to go with it. Walters. The Walters weren't a huge company. They were then a New York Central 50-foot boxcar. Madison Hardware. That was another legendary shop in Manhattan. I was never in it because it sold mostly Lionel high rail O gauge stuff, but apparently this place was unbelievable. If you were looking for a part for some 1938 Lionel steam locomotive, you would find it in this place in Madison Hardware. I've never been in it, but it's legendary. It's long gone. Well, not long gone, but it's been gone a good while now. Still more uses for switch machine contacts. Again, using the contacts on a switch machine to actually operate other things. So we've had electronics, we've had scratch building, we've had engineering, we've had history, and these I've got some of these books. I've got that one and I got that one. These are like classic books from Callenbach, who published Model Railroader. More electronic stuff you can do. Relay switch machines. This would have been a time when HO was becoming dominant. TT, you see ads for TT scale, it was kind of losing its gravitas in the American modeling, but it's coming back now on other things. And N hadn't really taken off, but O was kind of in its decline, and HO, mainly because of things like the better running of the track and so on like that, was becoming more popular. More look, all the reading, all the stuff you could, and these are all like clinics. Like I've got this problem, I've got that problem, how to do this, how to do that. Ambroid, they used to make kits as well. These lovely old Victorian open Celestri passenger cars. See TT gauge. X2F couplers, they're the horn and hook original couplers. And here's the people, all the services, foreign magazines, railroad books, railroad movies, recordings. And here's the proved model dealers. Let me look at the New York ones to see if I know any of them. That one in Danvers, I still think is there in Boston. New York, let me see. The Bronx, no, I didn't know one there. Brooklyn, I knew one. There was actually an American Hobby Center in Brooklyn, an outlet. Brooklyn, Buffalo, Center Reach, Jamaica, Lynbrook. That's still there to this day. Trainland. If you watch the Sopranos show, one of the guys got whacked inside there. That shop is still there to this day on Sunrise Highway, and it's a fantastic shop. Back then it was called House of Mulranny Trainland. That one's still going. There was one in the Port Authority bus terminal. That's long gone. This was Houston Sales and Trains, Madison Hardware again. Readers Exchange, people looking for stuff, people looking for someone to paint their brass thing. Train. And Fleischmann, you'd never see Fleischmann ads for their track system in American magazines now. So a lot of stuff was there's the boom of HO railroading or railway building in post-war Germany, and these were the HO super tracks. This is when they first started using plastic instead of the fiber. They had like fiber tube track that where a pin was inserted into the next track. So, what you call it, Kleinbahn had a similar type system as well. And here's all the geometry. It is astonishing the geometry between U.S., British, and European, set track. You can actually literally build anything. Now, I hear people complain about brass track, and there's something about the Fleischmann brass track. It does not have that sort of like particulate buildup on the rail that causes contacts that say other types do, like the brass track made by Atlas, the old Atlas brass track. That whatever formula they use to actually fabricate their brass, if you want to get brass track, that doesn't cause contact problems. Get the Fleischmann ones. Their points are very, very useful. These are very reliable. I still have a few of these old ones on my layout. They're like from this period, and they work great. No problem at all. They're very robust and well made. And then out of the back for Arcane, the Peak of Perfection, Baltimore, Maryland, and a beautiful B&O Vanderbilt tank with the round boil the round tank. Yep. So there you go. Another magazine, Model Railroader, May 1963, 50 cents. And why? This is the hobby. This is the art of model railway, model railroading. Okay, thank you.